My adopted daughter told me, my wedding is only for special people, right after she didn't invite me. I just said, I see. A week later, she actually called. Rent and tuition are overdue. Did you transfer the money? She demanded. I answered her, calmly. Didn't I tell you I was retiring? Ah, that was yesterday, only for special people. That's what she'd actually said when I asked her about the date of the wedding. It wasn't an, oh, I'm sorry, we wanted to invite you. It wasn't. It was something small, just at City Hall. There wasn't even a guilty silence. Just a smug little smile, a quick shrug, and that phrase that felt like a butcher's knife. I was standing there rinsing my coffee cup. No drama, no broken crockery, nothing overturned. I just stood there, holding that cup like an absolute fool, looking at the same little girl I'd taught to ride her bike when she was 6. She used to sob into my shirt when her hamster died. She always left me crayon drawings that said, "Best Dad," stuck right there on the refrigerator. Only for special people, she repeated, this time quieter, as if I were the one who was slow and hadn't grasped the concept. I put the cup down and simply said, I see. That was it. I didn't press her. I didn't cry. I just walked past her in the hallway. She was already back to typing on her phone, completely shameless, offering zero explanation, just scrolling as if I were nothing more than background noise. You know, that's the brutal part of parenting no one talks about. When the child isn't yours by blood, there is no safety net for heartbreak. You pour everything into them. You give and you pray the foundations will be strong enough. But when they decide to cut you out of their life story, it feels like you were never even there. You're just erased, and not even with malice, but with this casual, careless disdain. She'd moved out a few years prior, but her wedding prep had been a constant revolving door of requests. Can you please be my guarantor for this rental agreement? Dad, do you think we can use your backyard for the engagement photos? I might need help with the venue deposit. And like a complete idiot, I helped. Every single time, I thought it meant something, that it proved I was important. That night, I went upstairs, sat down at my desk, and opened the computer folder I'd labeled Casey's wedding. Inside were photos she'd emailed me with venue ideas. There was the PDF scan of the receipt, the one I'd paid to reserve the very venue she ended up using. I selected the folder, hit delete, and then emptied the trash. No emotional outburst, no final words, just gone. The funny part is, she didn't even notice the shift. The very next day, she sent me a text, a meme. A meme. Some corny joke about marriage and pizza. It was as if nothing momentous had happened, as if I hadn't been purposefully excluded from the biggest day of her life. I replied with a thumbs up emoji and then just stopped replying altogether. You know that saying about putting things in boiling water? It shows who's a potato and who's pasta. Casey, she thought she was the master chef. She thought she was in control. But the minute I stopped being the guy who always answered, always paid, always forgave, she had absolutely no idea how to handle me. Not right away, of course, that would come later. First came the silence, then a confusion that slowly grew, and right behind that confusion, an increasing arrogance. I figure she thought I was just sulking, that I'd get over it eventually. But I wasn't sulking. I was calculating. She didn't know that while she was celebrating her little special people moment, I was sitting in front of an old metal security box at the back of my closet. I kept every check stub in there, every tuition statement, every rental agreement, the paper proof of exactly who made her independent life possible. She didn't know I had a spreadsheet titled Casey Finances Support Program. She didn't know I'd already added a new tab called Closure. And she definitely had no idea that I had zero intention of continuing to finance someone who could look me in the eye and tell me I wasn't special enough to attend her wedding. That night, I poured a whiskey, leaned back, and finally, after all that time, I let the anger slide off me. It felt like shedding an old code I no longer needed. I'd spent 20 years wrapped up in that emotion. It was time to let it go. Not for peace, not for healing, but because I had a much better use for the silence that was about to arrive. The house was always quiet, but that night it felt clinical, like the silence in a hospital wing after visiting hours are over. I sat in my office with the lights off, just the desk lamp on, staring at the wall of photos. Casey at almost 5, showing off her first report card, proud and gap-toothed. Casey almost in high school, arm in a cast, a huge smile, marker in her good hand. Casey on the porch of her freshman dorm, hugging me like she couldn't decide if she was excited or terrified. There was one of us at a father-daughter breakfast. She'd made me a paper tie with Dad, written in glitter. I still have it, tucked away in the bottom drawer. I didn't cry. I didn't feel like crying. I felt displaced, like I had been summarily evicted from a life I'd built. I wasn't her father. I was a subscription service she forgot to cancel. I turned to the laptop. The screen lit up, showing the financial spreadsheet I hadn't closed. Every single payment I'd made since she turned 18 was documented there. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I always believed that when she was successful, I'd be proud to know I helped build her launchpad. Rent, $200. First quarter of college, $3,500. Textbooks and supplies, $100. Car insurance, $850. Deposit for the wedding venue, $2,000. Non-refundable. The numbers blurred. I blinked. Then I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. It was titled Contingency Account Closure. I had created it when she was 15, right after her biological mother made her first reappearance. A thin, manipulative woman who would pop up every few years like an oil slick, drop some poisonous words, and then vanish again. Casey had almost cried for her once. I remember being outside her bedroom door, listening to her sob. She doesn't even know me. And I almost went in. Almost. But I didn't, because a small part of me already knew that one day, she would choose that woman. Not for logic, not for love, but for blood. People crave their origin stories more than they crave stability. I looked at that folder again. Inside, all the linked bank details for her. Every automatic payment, every account I'd created in her name. My plan was to close everything, not out of spite, but for absolute clarity. My therapist once told me, people reveal your value in the roles they assign you. I thought I was dad. It turned out I was funding. I didn't touch the phone, not a message, not a warning. This wasn't revenge. I wasn't angry enough for that. This was math. Balances. I started the process. Step 1. Unlink the automatic tuition payment. She had just finished midterms, so there would be a natural pause before the next payment window. Perfect timing. Step 2. Schedule the closure of the joint credit card. She'd only ever used it for emergencies. She hadn't realized it was under my name. Step 3. Change the utility bills for her apartment, currently linked to my automatic bank payment, to manual. Let the due date knock on her door for once. Every box I checked brought not pleasure, but an incredible calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting emotionally, I wasn't driven by guilt, and I wasn't overcompensating. It was a constant, silent dismantling of her dependence. She would feel it, but not immediately, and not loudly. That was the whole point. Since she chose to exclude me from the moment that defined her new life, I was choosing to exclude myself from the machinery that sustained it. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't post a bitter Facebook status. I didn't even tell a soul. But that night, a man who once believed parenthood was a promise realized he'd been treated like a contract, and one party had decisively breached it. I closed the laptop, stood up, stretched, and for the first time in a very long time, I actually slept without waiting for a call that never came. The wedding brunch happened a week later at a rustic French spot in a gentrified corner of the city. Edison bulbs, expensive eggs, 2 mini mimosas. Casey and her new husband, Jeremy, were at the head of a long reclaimed wood table, surrounded by people who now qualified as family. I hadn't been introduced to most of them, but I recognized her biological mother across the table. Stiffer hair, longer nails, a posture dripping with theatricality. Finally, she could play the role she'd abandoned decades ago. I wasn't invited, naturally, but I saw the photos. They were all over Jeremy's aunt's Facebook page the next morning. She accidentally tagged me in one, then quickly untagged me, but the damage, or perhaps the clarity, was done. The tone of that brunch, the absolutely dizzying confidence with which they erased me from the timeline, hit me in a different way. Jeremy stood up, mimosa in hand, wearing that kind of unearned confidence only men who marry into a legacy seem entitled to have. To the family that always believed in us, he said, smiling widely. Everyone applauded. Casey stood up, glass raised, and added, to the people who have never failed us. The biological mother nodded smugly, as if the phrases had been rehearsed. Maybe they had been. Maybe this entire brunch was less a celebration and more an active rewriting of history, while the ink was still fresh. Casey looked around like a queen surveying her loyal court. Everyone was smiling. Everyone except one. Jeremy's aunt, Joan, I think her name was, sat halfway down the table. Older than most, she was much more observant. She clapped politely, but her eyes didn't quite match her hands. While the rest launched into laughter and inside jokes, she discreetly pulled her phone out of her purse and checked it. I know because in one of the brunch photos, her screen is barely visible. If you zoom in, you could see she was scrolling through old social media posts. My posts. A birthday card Casey drew for me when she was 7, a photo of us canoeing, me standing in the rain at her high school graduation, completely soaked, but smiling like an idiot while she held her diploma. She opened one more image. It was an old one. Casey holding a moving box, me standing behind her in a campus parking lot. The caption she wrote, I wouldn't be here without him. It's amazing how quickly people forget their own words. Joan locked her phone and then unlocked it. Her fingers typed something, a short message, a link, maybe a screenshot, and she sent it. Not to Casey, not to the mother, but to someone else. That's when the story truly changed. Not at the brunch, but outside of it. The story had been too perfect, too carefully curated, and someone at that table had finally spotted the huge stain in the corner of the picture. Meanwhile, I was home alone, drinking burnt coffee and trying to decide whether to clean the garage or just throw my phone into the nearest river. I didn't know about the toast until later. I didn't hear the words in real time, but I felt them in the way Casey wasn't messaging me. In the total silence of a girl who used to call me every single Sunday like clockwork. I was her Sunday tradition. Now I was a censored paragraph in a memoir she was rewriting with a different father. I didn't get angry. I didn't fume. But I did stand up. I walked into the living room, took down a picture, and turned it over. On the back, written by her, was a message for the only man who was always there. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I slid the frame into a drawer. Some memories you keep, others you have to bury alive. But what I didn't know was that while I was trying to forget, someone unexpected had just started digging. Joan was not a gossip. She wasn't a meddler, or one of those irritating family members who hover too long around drama just to fan the flames. She was an observer. She notices things, she files them away, a librarian of uncomfortable truths. And something about that brunch just didn't sit right with her. She had no real stake in the matter, no reason to care. But that toast, that moment when Casey laughed and raised her glass to the people who never failed us, it set something off. Not a memory, but a nagging question that had been hovering, waiting for a crack in the noise. Later that night, alone in her apartment with a cooling cup of chamomile, she opened her laptop. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, just following a hunch, the same way you double-check the locks even though you know you closed the door. She opened Casey's old Facebook albums. Surprisingly, they were still public. People always forget to lock the attic of their digital life. One album jumped out, The Best Dad in the World. It was years old. Photos of Casey with a man Joan hadn't heard mentioned once the entire wedding weekend. A man she had assumed was deceased or estranged, or maybe out of the picture, in that vague way people use when they don't want to explain. But he wasn't just in the picture. He was the picture. Photo after photo. Him holding the handlebars of her bike as she learned. Him bandaging her scraped knee. Him dropping her off at college with a crowded duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Birthday parties, school plays, a photo of them in the snow, building what looked like the worst snowman ever constructed. She opened another tab and searched for his name. It didn't take long. LinkedIn, old donation records, a GoFundMe from years ago where he had helped a classmate of Casey's study abroad. The donation was anonymous, but Casey had tagged him in the thank you post. Tuition paid in full. Joan leaned back, hands clasped under her chin. Then she opened her email. She typed her brother's name, Greg, the groom's father. Subject, did you know this? The body of the email was short. Did you know that her adoptive father paid for her college, her apartment, and the wedding venue deposit? That man who raised her never got a mention, not once. Look at this. She attached screenshots. One of the graduation photo, one of a bank transfer Casey had publicly thanked him for 2 years ago. Then a final attachment, a photo of Casey at 8 years old, hugging him with her arms around his neck. The caption read, "He says he's not my real dad, but real always means blood." She pressed send. Greg replied 2 minutes later. Wait, he did? I thought she was independent. That's what her mother said. Joan didn't reply immediately. She was still looking at Casey's engagement photos, the ones Casey had sent in a group email to half the planet, but not the man in those childhood photos. Joan typed. So, who exactly was special enough to be invited to the wedding? There was no answer, because honestly, what could he say? The truth was starting to itch beneath the surface. A man had built the entire foundation, and these people were dancing on the roof, pretending he wasn't holding up the whole structure. Joan wasn't angry yet, but she was deeply curious. And curiosity, in the right hands, can be a weapon. She clicked on Casey's most recent photos. Not a trace of her father. No mention, no tag, completely erased. And that felt to Joan like more than just disrespect. It was deliberate, as if someone had decided long ago that he just didn't fit the image Casey wanted to project. Not in her brunches, not in her fairy tale wedding, not in her social climbing life. But facts don't simply vanish because you hide them. And Joan had just started turning the pages they tried to rip out. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was pruning the bushes in the backyard. I remember my hands were covered in dirt when the phone vibrated, and for a split second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Casey's name popped up. No, hello, Dad. No context. Just, hello. The rent was returned, and the tuition is due. You forgot to transfer it. Not a greeting. Not a shred of warmth. Just an order wrapped in a question, as if I were her payroll department and my delay had inconvenienced her busy social calendar. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered calmly. Didn't I tell you I was retiring? I could hear the absolute confusion in her silence. A little snort, as if she thought she must have misheard me, or that I was joking. She let out a small, tight, fake laugh. Okay, but seriously, the rent is due and the tuition portal is counting down. Can you just do it while I'm on the phone? I looked at the garden, the tools at my feet, the morning sun hitting the wooden fence I built myself when she was 10 because she wanted a dog. I remembered her sitting there with a paintbrush, helping me stain it a color she called dusty earth. I had become the dust, and she had moved on. Casey, I said slowly, I told you I'm retiring. But why now? She demanded, her voice sharper, trying to slip back into that old high school tone she used when she wanted a favor. Is it because of the wedding? I didn't answer. She pressed on. Come on, we've always handled this like adults. You know you can count on me to pay it back. That phrase was so absurd that I actually smiled. Count on you. I repeated, not mocking her, just genuinely stunned. Casey, when have you ever paid me back anything? She went silent, then immediately defensive. I didn't mean it like that. I mean, I appreciate everything you've done. You know I do appreciate. The kind of appreciation that deletes your name from the guest list. The kind that forgets you in the toast. The kind that never mentions the man who pays the bills when listing, who always believed in us. Look, she continued, I just need a little help this month. We're tight after the wedding, and Jeremy hasn't gotten his full commission yet. I said nothing. I just let the silence hang there. She filled it, desperate. You're being mean. Still nothing. You're punishing me. That's what this is. You want me to apologize so you can feel like you have the upper hand. And there it was, the default defense of people who believe love is just obedience. I took a deep breath, without anger or emotion, just utterly fed up. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm removing myself from an equation that doesn't need me. She tried to laugh again, but it broke in the middle. Okay, I get it. You're angry. You've made your point. I didn't say another word, she quickly added. But just this once, can you transfer the rent? I don't want to deal with the landlord on top of all this. I'll fix it later. I hung up and then blocked her number. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of liberation. A line isn't always drawn with a scream or a slammed door. Sometimes it's silent, a single, calm boundary finally imposed. After years of being nothing more than a concept, Casey was about to learn that the money was never automatic. It had only flowed like water because the man who built the well was still there. Now he'd left, and the tap was officially dry. The next call came 2 days later. Different name, same tune. This time it was her biological mother, Sabrina. A voice I hadn't heard in almost 5 years, not since the last time she'd shown up unannounced and left a trail of perfume, lies, and judgments behind her like cigarette smoke. Hello, she said with fake cheerfulness. Long time no see. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I doubt that has ever stopped you, I replied dryly. She gave a thin laugh. Okay, fair enough. Look, I'm just calling to talk about Casey. Of course. There was a pause. I pictured her biting a perfectly manicured nail, trying to figure out how to start the performance. She opened with the soft approach. They always do. She told me that you've been distant, that you've canceled things. I didn't answer. She's very upset, she continued. She thinks you're punishing her for a misunderstanding. There it was. The spin. Not a betrayal, not an abandonment, just a misunderstanding. As if forgetting to invite the man who raised her daughter to her wedding was merely a scheduling error. I leaned on the kitchen counter, looking out the window at the bird feeders swaying in the breeze. A cardinal landed, pecked once, and flew away. Even birds know when to leave something empty. I'm not punishing her, I said slowly, measuring each word. I'm correcting. Silence on the other end, then a quick snort. Oh, come on, she snapped, dropping the warm act like a broken mask. This is way beneath you. She was nervous. Okay, she didn't think you would want to come. Nervous, I repeated, expressionless. So, instead of asking, she just erased me. She didn't erase you, she insisted. She just didn't want to create an awkward situation. You know how complicated it's always been between us. Ah, there it was. Us. The deep, hidden grudge finally raising its ugly head. This isn't about us, I said. This is about her rewriting her entire life without the only person who never abandoned her. She's young, said Sabrina, suddenly adopting a fierce maternal defense. She makes mistakes. You're the adult. You're supposed to be above that. No, I said. I've been above that for 2 decades. I financed her, supported her, raised her, guided her, protected her, and accompanied her at every stage of her life. She made a decision. I made one too. She's your daughter. She's your daughter, too. I reminded her. But you didn't pay for her career. You didn't stay up all night when she had bronchitis at 7. You didn't sell your boat so she could take a summer course abroad. You only showed up when it was convenient. And now you're sitting at the wedding table. You're resentful. I'm fed up. That ended the call. She didn't say goodbye. She just hung up, not in anger, but with silent, restless static. And then, mercifully, nothing. That night, I sat at the dining room table with a legal pad and the laptop. Automatic payments, canceled. Utilities, unlinked. Tuition account, disconnected. The backup emergency card, removed. Her gym membership. Her student union fees. The Amazon Prime account she used under my name. Gone, gone, gone. I went through each step, not with any joy or malice, but with a strange, deep calm, like deleting an app you haven't used in years. No emotional residue, just quiet satisfaction. And all the while, I kept picturing that brunch. Casey's glass raised, her eyes shining, laughing about the people who never failed us. Maybe she actually believed it. Maybe she convinced herself that I wasn't family, that I was merely logistics. Well, logistics can be canceled. And for the first time in her life, she was about to learn the profound difference between unconditional love and unconditional access. It started with something small, a decline card at the campus bookstore. Casey barely noticed. She just assumed the machine malfunctioned. She used another card, paid, and moved on. But then her gym key fob flashed red instead of green. The receptionist smiled uncomfortably. Your account shows a payment issue. It's probably just a billing error. Casey shrugged it off. She was a newlywed, still radiant from the wedding, still floating in the illusion that adulthood was just freedom with better lighting. Her husband, Jeremy, hadn't noticed either. He was too preoccupied trying to hit sales quotas to qualify for that elusive bonus that promised to elevate their lifestyle. Then the email from the university billing office arrived. Subject, action required. Unpaid tuition. She opened it, skimming the bold text. Her loan portal, which she never really understood because she never had to, now showed an outstanding balance of $1,275. Payment pending, tuition flagged. That's when the first small crack of panic shattered her indifference. She called the student finance office. She was bounced from one person to the next. They finally confirmed that the registered sponsor's automatic payment had been removed. She hung up, called her mother, no answer. Called Jeremy. He answered, "Hey baby, what's up? Something's weird with the university stuff and my card, and I got a strange message from the landlord this morning." Jeremy paused. What kind of message? He said the rent was returned. Returned, he repeated. But I thought your father. She fell silent. Casey, he said, sharper now. I thought you said your father took care of this. Her voice was tiny. He always did. Jeremy sighed. Well, then call him and have him fix it. We'll figure it out. They drove to my house. I wasn't there. Or maybe I was, but the lights were off, and I didn't answer the doorbell, the knock, or the second, louder knock. Jeremy even tried the doorknob. Locked solid. They eventually left. Back at their apartment, Casey tried to use her bank card again. Declined. She checked the tuition portal. Still unpaid. The doorbell rang. It was the landlord. Hi, Casey. Sorry to stop by, but we haven't received the rent. I just wanted to check if everything is okay. She managed a weak smile. Yes. Just a bank mix-up. I'll sort it out today. Okay, he said, clearly unconvinced. I just wanted to let you know. Policy says I have to start the late notice paperwork if it's not paid by the end of the week. She closed the door and just stood there, staring into space. Jeremy walked out of the room, holding his phone. Well, he hasn't answered, she said. Did you leave him a message? No, he's not answering, and I think he's blocked me. Jeremy blinked. Wait, what? She nodded slowly. Jeremy's face darkened. This is really bad, Cass. We don't have money for rent and university right now, and I won't get my commission for another 6 weeks. I didn't think I would have to worry about that yet, she whispered. Her voice was smaller than ever. He always took care of the payments. Yes, but why would he stop? She couldn't answer because no one had warned her. No one had prepared her for a world where I wasn't the automatic solution, where I wasn't the invisible current propelling her forward. Her safety net was gone, not maliciously cut, just simply removed. And standing there in her apartment, realizing her life was built on a credit she assumed would never expire, the quiet truth began to sink in. There was no plan B because she had already burned the only one that was the plan. And now she would have to pay the full, shocking price for pretending that I didn't matter. Joan didn't act quickly. That wasn't her way. She wasn't one for impulsive moves or confrontations. But once she saw the whole pattern, the toast, the photos, and the silences all fitting together, she couldn't keep quiet. The whole thing seemed ugly. So she waited. She waited for Casey's artificial glow from the wedding weekend to completely fade. She waited until her phone buzzed too many times with vague updates from Casey, who always avoided the real issues. She waited until Jeremy, her nephew, called her to say, "Hey, Casey is really stressed. I don't know what's wrong. Something about her father being weird." That was the opening Joan had been waiting for. She called him that night. No small talk. You need to know who you've married. Jeremy paused. What? Joan was in her study, reading, glasses low on her nose. Documents were spread out on the table, as if she were prepping for a trial. She had done her homework, screenshots, printed emails, old social media posts, matching dates, bank transfer confirmations, even a thank you post Casey wrote during her senior year of college. I wouldn't have made it without Dad's help. Grateful beyond words. Joan's voice remained calm, practical, delivering only the truth. Her adoptive father paid her college tuition, every dime, in cash. He paid her rent for years. He helped co-sign her car, her apartment. I even found the receipt for the wedding venue deposit. His name is on it. Jeremy didn't speak. She blocked him, Joan continued. Or at least completely ignored him. She didn't invite him to the wedding. She didn't mention him at the brunch. She didn't even toast him. She just erased him. Silence. You married someone, she said slowly, who cut ties with the man who made her life possible. Not because he hurt her, not because he failed her, but because he didn't fit the image she wanted. Jeremy cleared his throat. Are you sure about all this? I have the records, Jeremy. This isn't just gossip. It's numbers, receipts, timestamps. Another pause. Then in a low, tight voice, he said, she told me her father was distant, that they were never close, that he didn't really support her emotionally. Joan exhaled, but she didn't laugh or raise her voice. She told you what she needed you to believe to justify what she did. But if you want to know who really raised her, who fed her, who answered every single call for help, look at who stopped paying the bills last week, and suddenly her whole world started to crumble. Jeremy's voice sounded small now. Why are you telling me this? Because I was at that brunch, she said, her tone finally hardening. And I saw you toast the people who never failed you. And I saw a man who gave 20 years of his life to your wife be treated like a footnote. Jeremy remained silent. You should know who you married, Joan finished. Not the version she presents. The version she buries. I need to think, he mumbled. I hope so. She didn't say goodbye. She simply ended the call, closed her laptop, and turned off the light. Miles away, Jeremy sat alone on the edge of his bed, the phone still in his hand, staring at the floor. The version of Casey he thought he knew, the strong, self-made woman, the loyal daughter who overcame adversity, now had a massive crack running right through her. A deep, sharp fracture. And once you see the fracture, you can't stop seeing it. Although he wouldn't say it out loud, not yet, something acidic stirred in his stomach. Not anger, not heartbreak, just profound disgust. Not for the lie itself, but for how easily he had believed it. He didn't slam the door. He just said, I need to get some air. He took his keys and left. No wallet, no purse, no jacket. He just walked out as if he didn't expect to be gone long. But somehow, he already knew he wasn't coming back. Casey stood there for a full minute after the door clicked shut, looking at the wood grain as if it could whisper something to her. Her phone was already vibrating in her hand, trying to reflexively bring him back. First, one message, then another. Jeremy, just talk to me. This is getting out of hand. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell everything. Please come back. No answer. His phone went straight to voicemail. By midnight, she had tried 3 more times. The last voicemail was silent, trembling. Please. I didn't know how to explain it. I thought it didn't matter anymore. At 2:17 in the morning, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't Jeremy. It was her mother. Sabrina walked right in without waiting for an invitation, holding a full leather purse and a ton of moral superiority. Her voice was sharp the minute she opened her mouth. I told you this would happen if you didn't control the narrative, she hissed. You let that ant snoop. Now look, he's gone. Casey didn't answer. She just stood in the kitchen with her arms crossed, her phone clutched in one hand. Mom, she said in a low voice. Why didn't you tell me what he did for us? Sabrina blinked. Did you know he paid my tuition? Did you know he covered the rent? You let me go into that wedding pretending I had made it on my own while her voice broke, while he was paying for the celebration venue. Sabrina's mouth flattened into a cold, unapologetic line. Because I didn't want to share the credit. I raised you too, she argued. Do you think he's the only one who sacrificed? I didn't want people to think he was the hero and I was just the woman who gave birth and disappeared. But you did disappear. You only came back when it was convenient. Sabrina didn't deny it. You told me he didn't care, that he was controlling, distant, that he didn't show up for your custody hearings. Sabrina's face tensed. I needed you to trust me. No, said Casey, her voice rising. You needed me to rewrite history so you wouldn't look like the villain, so he could be the disposable one. I didn't force you to block him. I didn't force you to exclude him from your wedding. No, said Casey, the tears starting to flow now, hot and furious. You just made it easy. They stood there in the kitchen's dim light. 2 women, both realizing they had constructed a narrative with such incredible care that neither of them knew what was true anymore, except for the consequences. And the consequences were very real. Jeremy still hadn't come home. Her tuition was still unpaid, her rent still overdue. And the only man who had silently held every piece of her life together had simply vanished. Not with anger or drama, but with perfect precision, like a pillar removed from under a stage no one knew needed it. The show had gone on for years, and now the floor was caving in. It arrived on a Thursday morning, slipped under the apartment door like a ghost seeping in with the cold air. No stamp, no return address, just her name in firm capital letters centered on the envelope, Casey. She bent down to pick it up, the way someone approaches bad news, slowly, but without illusions. Inside, a check. $1. She looked at it, confused for a moment. A joke? A scam? Her mind searched for a context until she saw the note, printed on crisp ivory paper in the same unmistakable, formal, neat typography, like something prepared for a trial. Payment for services rendered. 2 decades of unconditional love, now officially settled. There was no signature, just a logo at the bottom, discreet but impossible to ignore. The foundation for forgotten parents. Established in honor of those who gave everything and were thanked with silence. She read it twice, then again, and again, until the hallway around her started to tilt. She fell to the floor, her knees buckling like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The check fluttered beside her. The letter remained clutched in her hand, her fingers marking creases in the paper as if trying to break it without succeeding. She didn't sob at first. No, she just sat there, mouth open, gasping under the weight of a pain she had not earned the right to avoid. It was so deliberate, so incredibly calm. He hadn't just left, he had immortalized his absence. He had turned it into a cause, a movement, a message, a silent monument to every man who raised a child not born of his blood, only to be cut from the final act. And she had no answer. She had no one left to call. Jeremy hadn't come back, not even to pick up his things. The hum of the refrigerator was louder than the phone, which hadn't rung since Sunday. Her mother had also gone silent. She had no more advice to give, no script to read now that the audience was gone. Casey sat there, eyes red, palms pressed against her face, as if she could physically contain the collapse. She whispered his name once, just once, as if saying it might rewind something, anything. But there was no answer. Just the distant hum of the city outside, oblivious to the breakdown of a woman who thought loyalty was disposable, who thought love was a faucet she could turn on and off. She had spent years believing she was the center of someone's world. And now, she didn't even orbit around him. The $1 check lay there like a tombstone. Proof that some debts can never truly be paid, only settled. And some people, when they finally let go, never come back. How does this story reflect the idea that people value stability, the father's consistent support, less than they value their origin story, the biological mother? In Casey's life, which foundation proved stronger? Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments.